Welcome to part 2 of the superhero rankings list. There's still a lot of movies to go through, so I'm getting straight into this. Number 167 is Zoom, Academy for Superheroes. And sadly, we see a returning face in a non-franchise movie. Kate Mara is in this piece of shit as well. So she has multiple films very, very low on this list. Zoom is such a mediocre, bland, forgettable film that I know half of you watching this right now went, "That was a movie? What?" And then had to look it up to make sure I'm not just making things up. Special effects were meh. Acting is meh. Jokes are terrible. Plot is predictable. There's nothing about this movie that makes it worth watching. Number 166 is X-Men Days of Future Past, which is not well constructed. The easiest argument in making this movie is when you can cut out a main character from the entire franchise and not actually affect the plot, then you're doing something wrong. And I don't mean a cameo. No, I mean like they literally released the Rogue Edition onto DVD and Blu-ray for the home video release, but I guarantee, having not seen that version, that it does not affect the plot in any way, shape, or form, which means they just did it because people wanted more Rogue as opposed to actually telling, being needed for the story type deal. And that kind of sums up my entire take of this film. Things happen for no discernible reason. Powers that people have for no discernible reason. And at the end of the film, who gives a flying fuck? Action is meh. Special effects are really generic by this point in the X-Men franchise. There's only so many ways you can do certain things with these powers, and by this point it's old hat and boring. I can't remember why they want the Sentinels to become a thing in terms of the government, and the whole movie's wrapped up in a big case of meh. For those asking, yes, the Quicksilver scene is probably the best, most enjoyable scene in the film. I like the actor as Quicksilver, but Evan Peters, whatever his name is, but the character's not a character. They literally wrote the character in just to fuck with the MCU when it was announced that they were going to be using the twins, Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, for Age of Ultron. The original scene that's written involved the Juggernaut, which once again goes back to this whole Rogue thing. How do you construct a movie this way? Like, you just threw in a random character because you could, not because you had to. Yeah, rewrote a scene to involve a character just to screw with somebody, not because you had to. It's very clear to me that the writers of the film were very much more interested in how many mutants can fit in here versus actually trying to tell a cohesive story, which really explains the overly convoluted nature of sending Wolverine back in time into himself, and that really doesn't make sense given the context of the film. Maybe the Rogue version explains that more. I don't know. It's a big pile of stupid with not really good action, even for this franchise. The action is really boring, and special effects we've seen time and time again at this point. Nothing worth watching here. We cannot get very far without hitting another X movie. Literally, the last one was an X movie. This one's a different one. This is The Wolverine. 165 is The Wolverine. The Wolverine had a lot of people go, "Oh, it's good, it's good." No, this movie is terribly constructed. More accurately, it is terribly written with no story structure anywhere to be found. It's got some pretty decent action scenes. I do really like Hugh Jackman in the character of Wolverine, despite him never appearing in a good film. As that character, I haven't seen Logan yet. At the time of this recording, it's not even out for me to see it yet. So, you know, maybe that's good, maybe it's awful, time will tell. Wolverine's biggest problem is having characters you don't give two shits about, and then having a big shocking ending that's neither shocking nor an actual conclusion to the story we watched unfold. That meant nothing in the grand scheme of things. This is sort of a movie that was sound and fury signifying nothing as a movie. Things happened, but Wolverine didn't get any better from anything. His character's the same throughout the entire film. Japanese person he's ostensibly helping doesn't get any better. The shock ending is stupid and just a sad way of introducing a character that many, many fans love, and it does not work. The armor for that said shocking ending, if you haven't seen it, I won't ruin it, but if you've seen any trailers for it, you know what I'm talking about, is terrible looking. And the dialogue is goofy, even for this franchise at times. Not entirely, but there are moments where it's just like, that's not how people sound or talk, you know? Kind of like with X-Men Days of Future Past, it was just a movie that they created to make money because it's the Wolverine or the X-Men franchise versus doing anything interesting or necessary with the characters. I like this more than Days of Future Past. It's not as insulting, it moves quicker, and the action's better. But that's not saying much. #164 is a DC animated direct-to-DVD film, and that is Crisis on Two Earths, which was the first DC animated movie I saw that I did not really like. There might have been a few released beforehand that I have wound up on this list, but this was the first one I saw, and oh, that's a huge step down from what I was expecting given their output. By this point, they had already released some really solid, really entertaining movies within their animated universe straight to DVD films. And this goes against all of that. The voice acting is boring. The character designs are good, but the animation is some of the stiffest that this branch of the WB has created. The use of CGI in some scenes does not work. And the overall plot is concerning parallel Earth where Lex Luthor's a good guy, but like none of it's properly explained, so you can't buy into it because that other world is not set up properly for you to care. If you have kids who really like Justice League, they can watch this. You'll be really bored by it. They'll think, oh, it's my favorite superheroes. But as they grow up, they will realize there are far better things to watch, far more interesting things to watch, and leave this one behind. #163 is Man-Thing. Man-Thing is kind of like Marvel's Swamp Thing, but I'm fairly certain Man-Thing got released first in terms of comics, but correct me if I'm wrong there. Far more importantly, this movie's backstory is way more intriguing than anything that actually happens in the movie proper. So here's some brief history on Man-Thing. It was originally slated to be a theatrically released film. Then, for whatever reason, it got dropped down to straight to DVD. And then, this is before Sharknado and everything, so bear that in mind. Then it got dropped down to made for TV. Specifically, it eventually got released on Sci-Fi Channel Um, and I don't know if that's the root cause of a lot of the issues with the film, or if the producers in the studio were seeing the deals and going, this is not what we wanted, this does not work, and that's why they knocked it down a few pegs. The acting's alright. When you do see main thing, it looks decent enough for the most part. Some weird CGI at times, but for the most part it looks okay. However, it's a movie that I can't say is terribly fun. It's a movie I can't say I enjoy, ironically, because it's an hour of nothing happening. It is a tedious, boring slog of shit to get through the last 20 minutes of what something finally happens. For a movie called Man-Thing is barely in the film. To be fair, he's meant to be more of like a legend, folk tale type deal, with his presence always being felt, and if there were a better director at the helm, maybe that would have worked. As it is, we're left with sort of just the first 30 minutes of Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, trade negotiations and business dealings, because that's what you want in your superhero movie, right? And it doesn't work. It's so boring. One simply does not care what's going on here, because the characters aren't well developed, they're not interesting, and try as the actors might, it's really hard to make any of these lines sound believable, and it's all directed with about as much subtlety and finesse as a sledgehammer to your face. It's movies like this that made Marvel go, we need to create our own studio, because they keep fucking up our films. And they were right. Number 162 is Superman 4, Quest for Peace. Superman 3 also has a reputation for being a really bad film, and it is, but it's at least trying. It's at least attempting to be a Superman movie. This is not. Quest for Peace is so lazy, so lackluster, that the villain is literally defeated by darkness. I'm not kidding. Which really doesn't make sense, because he's Nuclear Man. I don't know what darkness has to do with there being nuclear powered anything ever. It's really awkward. The flying sequences are astoundingly bad. Christopher Reeves, bless him, he tries so hard. He is a great Clark Kent. He is a great Superman, and he's trying in this film. He's given nothing to work with. The script is awful, but he is trying. That's something, at least. But this movie is just sad, more than insulting and more than anger-inducing. It's a sad affair. I can understand somebody watching it as a so bad it's good movie, but for me, this film is just like watching a train wreck. Before it happens, you can just see the way the train's going. You know it's going to derail, but you can't do anything about it. That's what this film is for me. Superman. For those of you curious, yes, I think X-Men Origins Wolverine is better than First Class, Days of Future Past, Apocalypse, or any of the other X-Men movies I may have named, but I don't think there are any others before this one. And that's because it is a film that isn't trying to be anything else. It is just here's a story of Wolverine, here's some good actors, here's a terrible script, and awful directing. But the movie was just meant to be like a fun, action-oriented excursion backstory to Wolverine. It was never this big epic like Apocalypse. It was never meant to be something that tied everything together, like Days of Future Past. And again, I'm not really sure what First Class was trying to be, so viewing it as such, because it's not quite as ambitious, it doesn't fail as badly in that regard. Mind you, there's something to be said for being ambitious. But when you have millions of dollars at your disposal and your ambitions don't pay off, screw you. If you had $1 million at your disposal and your ambition doesn't pay off, at least you're ambitious. You see the difference? X-Men Origins Wolverine has terrible special effects, laughably silly stunts, and action choreography. Bad editing, but there are moments that are really fun. Liev Schreiber as Sabretooth is really good. They have a fight in or in front of a bar or something like that. That's a lot of crazy enjoyment. And actually, out of action scenes I liked in the film. So yeah, I don't really remember anything about the plot. His girlfriend dies, or doesn't actually die. I don't remember, so don't ask. But because it's only trying to be a stupid action film, it's not as painful for me to watch as the other X-Men films that I've already named. So yeah, it's bad, it's corny, it's hokey, it's got terrible special effects. But it's just bad in a, oh yeah, that happened, now I can forget it kind of way. Underdog was a TV show in the 70s, I think. I don't quite remember though. And Disney decided to make a live-action version of the titular dog superhero. Just from a conceptual standpoint, that is stupid. Doing an animated version, sure. But doing a live-action version in which your main character is a flying superhero dog. That just doesn't work, and it doesn't. The special effects to make the dog fly and the CGI that they use when they're not using a real dog is bad. And it's not necessarily the worst CGI ever, but there's such, it's always noticeable when they stop using the real dog and it's now been replaced by the CGI creation. It's always noticeable. It's uncanny valley, it's clearly CGI, it's a little bit rubbery, not all the time, but a little bit. So that doesn't add up. If the whole movie were CGI, if the whole movie were traditional 2D animation, it wouldn't matter. It doesn't help that the plot of this film is very generic and very on the nose and very predictable. But really, the biggest downside to the film is that it is live action. They don't go for broke like they should have. For example, the live action Dudley Do-Right movie starring Brendan Fraser, the way it's edited, the way it's written, the way it's performed, the way it was shot, everything about it makes it feel like a live action cartoon. And I'm not saying that's good or bad, but I'm saying when doing a live action version of this sort of thing, that's what you want. It doesn't feel like a live action cartoon except when the CGI dog's around. It's very awkward. Like, if you were to replace the CGI dog with just, let's say, like a 13 or 14-year-old who had superpowers, you wouldn't really have to rewrite the plot that much. Make all the main characters humans and stop having them refer to themselves as, you know, the various kinds of dogs that they are. That's about it. I think that's missing the point. It really should have gone for broke. It really should have been much more energetic and way over the top. And it's not. And that's really, that makes it forgettable and lackluster. Another controversial pick, especially when you see the film that's immediately preceding this one, Batman Begins is not a very good movie in my opinion. There are very good elements to it. Liam Neeson gives a very good performance. Christian Bale is awesome in the movie. He is great. Michael Caine as Alfred, great. The first part of the plot involving the investigation of Scarecrow, I enjoy. But the morals and themes don't add up. From the very beginning, Bruce Wayne is traveling the world. He's invited to the League of Shadows, is what I think they're called. Correct me if I'm wrong there. He goes through all the training, and then he has to kill somebody, and he's like, no, trial, jury, then we decide if he's guilty or not. League of Shadows is like, no, that's not. So they have a big fight. And from the get-go, it's not that the fight's bad. It's well edited and fairly exciting. It's that Bruce Wayne immediately becomes a hypocrite by not saving the guy he's literally fighting to save. That puts everything else in the film in a weird moral gray area. However, in that instance, I can actually kind of follow it. He wasn't expecting a big fight. He is trying to save the one he has a personal connection with, being Liam Neeson's Ra's al Ghul. So, alright, I can kind of see it. But when you build your whole movie on that foundation of what Bruce Wayne, who's trained to become Batman, believes in terms of justice and why he's being a vigilante, then maybe you shouldn't have written it so he lets the person he's fighting for die when he could have saved him. Does that make sense? But again, I can understand people forgiving that, is what I'm trying to get at. Far more importantly, though, the other main half of the story, besides the rise of Batman, the rise of crime, and whatnot in Gotham City, is the love story between Rachel Dawes, as played by Katie Holmes, and Christian Bale. One to very often discuss age issues in the movie. I get that hiring a high schooler to play a high schooler in a movie is not always feasible. You hire a 20-year-old. They look a little bit older, so be it. I think Andrew Garfield was like 25 or 26 when he got the role of Peter Parker for his Amazing Spider-Man movies. I have no problems there. He looks young enough. I'm not saying he looks like a teen, but he looks young enough for me to buy it within the context of the movie. Here, though, Bruce and Rachel are meant to be within a year of each other. They're roughly the same age. Looking at Christian Bale and Katie Holmes, there's obviously a 10-year age difference between the two, which immediately makes it very odd. But that's very minor nitpicking, so this just leads into a major complaint that I do have about the film, so it just kind of ties in that. They have no chemistry at all. They don't even have negative anti-chemistry where you can tell they just hate each other off screen. They look like strangers passing each other in a grocery store who vaguely recognize each other. Like, did I see you at a PTA meeting once? Maybe. And they do a head nod and keep going. They're so bland and boring together that a good chunk of the film is never believable. A good chunk of the movie is actively hurting itself by having these two actors share the same space on the screen. The Dark Knight fixes this by replacing Katie Holmes with Maggie Gyllenhaal, who's way better. And it's not that Katie Holmes gives a bad performance in the film. It's just that because Christian Bale is so good as Bruce Wayne and as Batman, that they should have gotten somebody who had chemistry with him, not necessarily somebody who had chemistry with her. Does that make sense? So it's not that she's necessarily bad in her performance outside of the scenes with Christian Bale as Bruce Wayne. She's perfectly okay. I wouldn't necessarily say it's the greatest performance or necessarily amazing, but it's perfectly okay. But together, they are not believable as a couple. This is Incredible Hulk levels of Liv Tyler, Edward Norton bad for me. And then the actual ending happens, and I understand that Batman doesn't have to save Ra's al Ghul, and that's not what I'm complaining about. But I think the Scarecrow gets shafted, and I think he continues to get shafted in the other two films as well. We spend so much time dealing with him and his crazy nightmare-induced powder stuff or spray or whatever it was. Now for him to just suddenly become a secondary villain for an ending involving dehydrating water is really awkward, and it doesn't work for me. I like the look of Gotham. I like a lot of the actors, just not necessarily together. And I think only bits and pieces of the story work. I realize I'm in the minority here, but I'm also in the minority in thinking that Batman's a vastly overrated hero. Batman can be good, just like Superman could be good, just like Iron Man can be good. But in the wrong hands, he's terrible. This isn't quite wrong hands terrible mode, but it is kind of a jumbled mess. If you replace Katie Holmes, if you rewrote it to make the Scarecrow much more of a defined presence and a much bigger villain at the end, maybe you'd have something. I don't know, but that's not the movie we got. What we got was only half okay. So it's the reason I stated that people would find Batman Begins such a controversial pick, aside from it being a massive hit and well loved by a lot, is because I put Steel in front of it. Number 158 is the Shaquille O'Neal starring film Steel, with its god-awful, obviously rubber suit. Mind you, the rubber suit is meant to look and be, well, steel. It's meant to be metal. Here's the thing. I don't enjoy watching Batman Begins. I can appreciate parts of it. I can go, oh, that was good. Nothing about Steel is good. Nothing about Steel should be appreciated from a technical standpoint because it's a bloody mess. But it is fun to watch. It is very enjoyable and very goofy and a really solid, so bad it's good film. It's not a mess. The story doesn't work. The special effects don't work. Shaquille O'Neal is a terrible, terrible actor. But it's fun. And I will take fun bad over super grim and serious only okay. Super grim and serious great, I will take over fun bad. But if it's between something that's okay and very dour, and something that's fun but not well made, I'll take the fun thing. I mean, my channel is called Terribly Fun Films for a reason. If you haven't seen Steel, I do recommend you watch it. But get some beers, get some friends, and have a good time. I feel really bad for Brandon Routh, because Superman Returns is meant to herald in him becoming a huge A-list star. It was meant to break him out of kind of the B movies and whatnot he had been doing and launch him as the next Clark Kent and Superman and all that jazz. And the movie failed to do that. The movie did not fail to do that because of him, though. He is a really good Superman. Not necessarily the best Superman, but he's solid in the role. He looks it. He's believable when he's flying and in the action scenes and everything. But therein lies the problem. You'll notice I only said he's a believable Superman and left the other half of that character off of the table. Sadly, that was done for a reason. Clark Kent is not in this movie. I'm not kidding when I say I'm fairly certain Clark Kent had somewhere between 3 to 5 scenes, equating to somewhere between 8 to 10 minutes worth of screen time in a film that's over 2 hours long. Clark Kent is literally one half of your main character. Jumping back to Batman Begins real quick, for whatever flaws that has, there's a very nice divide of time between Bruce Wayne and Batman. It really does make you believe, with all the training and everything that we see in the beginning, that he could become that character. But we got to know Bruce Wayne. We got to know his fears, his insecurities, his hopes, his dreams, all that jazz. Then we get to know him as Batman. The movie does a really good job balancing those two. Superman Returns does not balance the two at all. It's a bloody mess in that regard from a characterization standpoint. And that's what kills the film. It doesn't help that Kevin Spacey's Lex Luthor has a really awkward plan of just creating more land because he wants to, maybe? I'm not totally sure there. He's gonna sell it for a lot of money or something? Whatever. The movie's biggest problem is not having Clark Kent. Without Clark Kent, we don't have a foil to accurately bounce off of for Superman. We don't relate to Superman. We aspire to be Superman. We relate to Clark Kent. And for whatever flaws both Man of Steel and Batman vs. Superman had, they get that right. Again, I think Henry Cavill is the second best Clark Kent in Superman. He's the best one since Christopher Reeves, in my opinion. And no, I'm not kidding. And I think both movies understand Clark Kent and Superman and balance that. This film doesn't. This film doesn't care if you like Clark Kent. This film doesn't care if you like its human characters. This film just wants to show off Superman flying, saving people, saving planes from crashing, and getting shot in the eyeball. Which is admittedly a pretty cool scene. Parker Posey is an amazing actress. Parker Posey is an indie darling for a reason. Parker Posey is fucking heinous in this film. I don't know what kind of direction she was given. I don't know what she thought she was trying to do. But it does not work, and every scene with her is fucking awful. Not to mention that Kal Penn is in this movie. And this was after the release of at least the first Harold and Kumar movie. I'm not sure about if it was after the release of the second one. Kal Penn has no lines in this movie. It's just a mess. It's weird. It's awkward. But the action is solid. The special effects are good. And I like Brandon Routh in this role. I want to still see him play Clark Kent at some point, because he has yet to do that, and I think he'd be really good at that. The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen is based on an amazing, if fucked up, dark, and kind of racist Alan Moore work. But by based, I mean they took the characters and the same concept of them working together and threw everything else away. The plot is so completely different that I'm not sure what they thought they were doing. And yeah, I get fanboy complaint, which I don't buy into all that often, so hear me out. That's not the problem with this movie. It's just a side note of what the production thought they were doing. To indicate what this movie is. Because they threw out the entire plot of the comic and just kind of started fresh, they basically made a James Bond movie using a bunch of fictionalized literary heroes and heroines. But it's just a James Bond movie, and nobody cares. However, For all the bad action and the bad editing and the bad special effects in this film, there are three great things. Set design. Set design in this film is astounding. Improbable, ridiculous, and not that realistic, but this is a movie in which Dr. Jekyll and Hyde, the Invisible Man, and Captain Nemo team up to fight a guy in a fucking blimp factory. I don't care about realism. The set design is magnificent. The costumes are great. Costumes are really good, and I feel so bad for the people who made those costumes because a lot of effort clearly went into these. And you can see them and you immediately know. Like, you just need to see their silhouette and you'll know who they are. That's how great the costumes are in this film. And then there's Jason Fleming as Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. He's amazing. It could just be because I love Jason Fleming as an actor. I don't know, maybe I'm a little biased there. But no one else is trying to make you empathize with the character. None of the actors are really trying that hard to sell the CGI they're fighting against and to sell the ridiculous world they live in. Jason Fleming is. He gives a very impressive, empathetic, realistic performance as somebody who hates Mr. Hyde, the other side that's in him, but realizes the necessary good that evil can do. And I wish the whole movie were about him. Had this just been a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde story with Jason Fleming, we'd probably love that movie. I would love that movie, but that's not what we got. We got a movie about a masked dude kidnapping people for their superpowers, I think, to build something. Do you see what I mean when I say this is a James Bond plot? It's awkward. And we got bored Sean Connery and bad special effects. Poor set designers, poor costume designers, and poor Jason Fleming. They all deserve better than this. I had such high hopes for Hancock. Here's a realistic superhero take starring Will Smith, Charlize Theron, and Jason Bateman, in which he goes to prison because he just causes lots of destruction when trying to stop a bank robbery. The rebuilding from all the destruction costs more than the villains would have gotten away with, so Hancock gets thrown in prison. Once he's out, he hires a PR guy, Jason Bateman, to help spin his image around, clean him up, so he can kind of learn to control his powers a little bit more and not be quite so destructive unintentionally, and not be such a drunk, because the character's a massive drunk in the beginning of the film. Yes, please, on paper, this sounds great. This should be mind-bogglingly, explosively fantastic. But I only described the first half of the movie. The reason I only described the first half of the movie, because that's what we were sold on. That is all the trailers and the posters and all the marketing for the film let you know about it. And there's nothing wrong with trying to keep secrets and that sort of thing. Look at Split, which was amazing. It keeps its secret really wrapped up, really tight. If you haven't seen it, go see it. It's a spectacular film. And then the ending happens, and it goes from spectacular to mind-blowing. So there's nothing necessarily wrong with doing it that way. But it also completely misrepresents what the actual film is. And that's not to say you shouldn't give a movie a fair shake. You should go in to see a movie and then just try to meet it at its own level. Which means if I'm watching a trailer for a film, like Trolls, and I think that movie looks terrible because that trailer is awful and annoying, I go watch Trolls. That movie's not that bad, actually. It's a very cute, fun kids movie. It's not nearly one of the best animated films of 2016, but it was a cute, fun film. I was able to meet it at its level, despite thinking it would be bad because of the trailers. That makes sense? So for Hancock, it's not that I'm against there being more to the story. It's not that I'm against that they didn't tell you what that more is in the trailers. It's that more to the story sucks total ass. Spoiler alert, Charlize Theron is also a superhero. And putting her and Will Smith in the same room together means they both lose their superpowers. Because... Huh? And so... Hancock runs away to the moon at the end. Sweet goddamn, what is going on? What the flaming fuck? I'm gonna repeat myself. Jason Bateman's wife is played by Charlize Theron. Coinkydinks of all coinkydinks. She too has superpowers. But when she and Hancock spend too much time together, they lose their superpowers. So, at the end of the movie, Hancock runs away to the moon. Happened to be a realistic, grounded take of a superhero film with a PR problem. And I'm not asking about the trailers or why they didn't tell us so much. I'm asking, the movie just switches fucking gears to this other thing. It just goes, oh, this is what we are now. And it comes out of nowhere. And it does not work at all. It's a terrible script. It was a terrible decision to do that. It's fucking awful from a storytelling and narrative standpoint. So, why is it higher than these other films I am not as passionately angry at? Because, technically speaking, this film's really well made. The special effects are good. I haven't seen it in a long time. I don't know if they held up well. But they were good at the time, and they were good when I watched it with my parents. My dad got it for his birthday or Christmas the year it came out on DVD and Blu-ray. So I've seen the movie twice, so I at least tried to give it another shot. I really like Will Smith. I really like Jason Bateman. And I really like Charlize Theron in the movie. She's playing a really difficult role, but she does it so well that it's sad that she's saddled with this dialogue and this dumb of a plot line. And moves really quickly. I'm not sure how long it is. I want to say it's like 2 hours or a little bit less, but it does move very quickly. Even when the stupidity happens, it just keeps going and going. The characters in the first half of the film are well fleshed out, and they're interesting. I just don't understand who thought this second story shift, the second half going into the mythology, and the biggest problem for me is the fucking standing in the room, we lose our powers thing. I'm okay with there being other superheroes in this world. We already have one. It kind of makes sense to have more. I can even almost get with the idea that there just happens to be one married to the dude hired to do the superhero's PR. Alright. But trying to expand the mythology by way of, I want to say it was Greek gods, that they're like being cursed them with a punishment. It might have been Romans. Somebody who likes the film can let you know in the comments. I can't be bothered to look this up. And then so all that's going on, and then it just doesn't work. It doesn't make sense, and the stories shift to that nonsensical stuff also does not work. The story is a mess, but it's a mess inside a well-made movie. It's very hard for me to hate this film because I don't want to, but the story's so bad. It's so bad that I have to. Supergirl was supposed to be the next big step for the Superman franchise. It does contain a cameo by Christopher Reeves as Superman. Seeing as how there are no sequels to this movie, you can probably guess how that turned out. Supergirl has solid costuming, good if weird production design and an okay actress at its core. Everything else about it is a bloody mess. The plot doesn't make sense. I want to say it's Peter O'Toole? I don't quite remember. Is overacting his ass off. The villain is really dull and dry, and people just kind of accept that she's related to Clark Kent. The writing's a bloody mess. It's really bad, it's really cheesy, it's really goofy. But if you're in the mood for so bad it's good fun, it can fit that bill. Batman Forever might seem weird that it's already on this list below Batman and Robin and all that. Batman Forever is the worst of the non-Christopher Nolan Batman films. Val Kilmer is really boring as both Bruce Wayne and Batman. The plot is all over the place with Jim Carrey as the Riddler and Tommy Lee Jones, Two-Face, and it's just very garish to look at. Joel Schumacher, the director, I kind of get what he was going for. It's supposed to be this like sugary candy pop neon explosion, very akin to the absurd colors you can find in some of the crazier comic books and whatnot, but he doesn't make it work. He doesn't make the city feel real or alive, and at one point it's actually an M.C. Escher painting in terms of how the Batmobile drives, and I just don't even know what's going on there. The plot involves Edward Enigma being obsessed with Bruce Wayne and Batman just kinda because. And then Two-Face is angry. I don't actually know why. And they're both trying to stop Batman because he's Batman. Who gives a shit? At a certain point, Drew Barrymore shows up. I don't think she has a single line in the movie. It's all very drawn out, a little bit tedious. Chris O'Donnell isn't a terrible Robin per se. He's terrible in terms of how they wrote him, but I think the actor, given how young he was at the time and stuff, could have been okay if better writing and better direction were involved. This film isn't anger-inducing, but it's also so anticlimactic and so dull, so boring, that it's tough to actually sit here and for me to recall everything that happened in the film to critique it, which is why it's so low on this list. Because at least if you angered me enough to be so violently pissed off, you've done something. You've hit something. And if I love you, obviously you've done something very well. If you're middle of the road and boring and I don't remember you, you're not doing anything well, and that's an issue. Justice League versus Teen Titans. It is once again a direct-to-DVD animated DC film. Once again, it involves a Damian Wayne. He's a teenager this go round. And it's a little bit better than some of the other Damian Wayne films we've discussed. In so much as, well, we're not focusing on that dunderheaded jackass, even though he is ostensibly the leader of the Teen Titans in this film, has decided he doesn't need teamwork or to help his fellow Teen Titans. I fucking hate this character, people. I hate him so much. But when we're not focusing on him, especially if we're focusing on Batman or the other members of the Teen Titan group, like Raven and especially Starfire, she is a remarkable story this go around. The movie does work. That's only about half the film of that. It's better animated, the animation's less stiff and less awkward than in some of the movies I recently discussed. And the colors are very big and bright this go around, which is really a nice change of pace. The voice acting is solid, and half the plot is fairly engaging. But that's still only half the plot. The other half involves all the Damian Wayne shit that I hate. Maybe this is just me personally hating Damian Wayne so much. Maybe if a viewer saw this movie who doesn't have that same disdain for him that I do, they might like it more. And I could understand that. Maybe this is just my personal issue for this particular film. But I do hate Damian Wayne. And once again, this just kind of repeats the story of needing to learn about needing to learn to care about others, needing to learn when to ask for help, and when teamwork is important and when you should do things on your own. The same lesson he's been taught since day one that he became Robin, and I'm tired of it. This film, though, isn't awful. And if you don't hate Damian Wayne, it might actually be good. But I do hate Damian Wayne, so I can't actually say that. Frank Miller's The Spirit, coming hot off the heels of Sin City. This film is done in a very similar style, written and directed by Frank Miller, and it feels very much like the insane Eisner comic it is based on. But it's a little too self-parodying to actually work. If you told me this film was a parody of a movie like Batman, Tim Burton's Batman specifically, or just a parody of comic book style movies, I would believe you, because that's how utterly nonsensically bizarre this movie is. Gabriel Lamont as the Spirit is actually really good. His voiceover work is phenomenal, and I like Samuel L. Jackson just overacting up a damn storm. He eats all the scenery in this film, and it's kind of great. But when you take all that and you have such divided tones, Gabriel Lamont and the character as written on page is very serious and very trying. And then you have everything else, which is this weird, big, bombastic, this is so ridiculous because we're comic book tone, and they never gel together. They never come together in a way that makes sense. I really want to like this movie more than I do because I respect it. I think I understand what it was going for. I think going for that big, bombastic, goofy, we are a comic book, we can do what we want tone was the right way to adapt the Spirit comics for the films, for a film. But they forgot to include the main character in on that little bit, which means that if it's just him alone, it's dark and gritty and very almost Blade Runner noir feeling. And then you have everything else, which is almost Adam West Batman show style, super goofy, super villainy things. Some jokes work. The acting is kind of all over the place, but I think each actor does well with what they were told to do and how their respective characters are written, if that makes sense. But the two conflicting tones don't merge. They don't come together in a way that is satisfying. And I enjoyed the film the first time I saw it in theaters because it was big and bombastic, and seeing this over-the-top stuff on the big screen was a lot of fun. But upon subsequent rewatches, the flaws became very apparent to me, and I apologize to anyone I did recommend the movie to at the time. I was wrong. I'm not sure how to fix it totally. go a little bit further, go a little bit crazier with the main character, I guess, but I'm not sure. As it stands, you have a very uneven film with good elements that just can't figure out what it wants to be. Jumper! This is not based on a comic book. How insane is that? This is based on a young adult novel, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. I know it's based on the book. I think it's a YA book, but and the movie's a boring film. Technically speaking, it's okay. It's got good special effects. It has a really good score, and Jamie Bell is bloody awesome in it. But that's kind of it. Hayden Christensen can be a good actor. See him in Shattered Glass. See him in Factory Girl. He's not the right person for this role, though. His sort of stoic performance leads to that kind of wooden robotic voice that people have made fun of him for. 2 Star Wars prequels he was in. And he does that again here, meaning the main character seems very bored with his life. Meaning you feel he's kind of a pampered asshole. So he's hard to relate to. And that destroys the movie. Destroys it. All I have to say about Jumper. Jumper could have been way better. It just isn't.